So welcome to the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission Board of Commissioners meeting. And I think what we'll do is do a round of introductions. We have some guests, so we'll make sure that they all get to introduce themselves as well. So I'm Steve Lotsweet from Waterbury. I'm vice chair, so I'm filling in for Laura, who is out of town today. So this is a scheduled fill-in. So I'll do the best I can to keep things moving and on schedule. I've got good coaches in the group, so let's see. Byron, why don't we go this way?
Byron Atwood, down.
Okay.
Dan Currier, staff.
Candy Andrea, staff.
Peter Carby, Washington.
Ron Crow, Middlesex.
Lee Titanio, Orange.
Jerry D'Amico, Roxbury.
Michael Gray, Woodbury.
Rich Turner, Williamstown.
John Brabant, representing Calais.
Jamie Stewart, Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation.
Dara Torrey, Moortown.
Bram Tobin, Plainfield.
Jack Pauley, East Montpelier, alternate.
Don LaHaye, Waitsfield.
Bill Aaron, Worcester.
Julie Potter, East Montpelier.
Bob Warnick, Berlin.
Alan Quackenbush, Duxbury.
Janice Shatney, representing Berry City.
Bonnie Waninger, staff.
So let's go. Go ahead, Zach.
Zach Maya, staff.
Ashley Andrews, staff. Marcella Dent, Montpelier.
Donna Bate, Montpelier City Council, and the TAC, and the Water Basin Group.
Robin Schoen, Marshfield.
Amy Hornblast, Cabot.
Stewart Clark, Worcester, and the Clean Water Advisory Council Committee.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Do you have anything, Bonnie? Any additions? Okay. We understand that Sue Minter is on her way. She ended up at the CVRPC offices instead of here, so she fortunately got a hold of Bonnie. So she's on her way. But we'll go ahead and do we have any public comments? If there's something that's on the agenda, we ask you to wait until that agenda comes up to comment. But if there's anything that is not on the agenda that you'd like to comment on or make an announcement about, this is the time to do it. So do we have any members of the public that have any comments? All right, so hearing none, we'll move right ahead into the agenda. So Dan Currier is here and smiling, so that's good. I think everybody knows by now that Dan is a short timer. And so
2 days left with this office.
2 days left, okay. So, well, I don't know, shorter than short. So Dan, if you could tell us where you're headed, that would be great. And then we'd like to honor you, and we have a special resolution that's in the packet that we're going to,
Thank you.
I think, probably read. But anyway, go for it. Tell us where you'll be.
Yeah, so if you didn't hear, I'm moving on. I'm going to become a new public transit coordinator with the Agency of Transportation. So I'll have some new digs. My office will be in downtown Barrie, in that the city center is what they call it. And so public transit is one of, they've got 3 public transit coordinators, so I'll be one of them. And but I'll see a lot of the coordinators that we already work with through TPI programming, and so they're literally right across the cubicle, so to speak. Yep. So I'll be responsible for one of the many public transit providers to help administer their grant, make sure they're meeting their milestones and the deliverables, as well as special projects like the Go Vermont website, which helps people link carpools and van pools and that kind of thing. And a few other tasks as well, is what I understand. So my first day is the 21st, and so that's why I'm short-lived here.
Great. Well, first of all, I'd like to really thank you, Dan. I've worked with you for all 15 of your years. They've been great run. You've been wonderful for Waterbury, and I think for lots of other municipalities. Great on the transportation side, working with the Transportation Advisory Committee. So what I'd like to do is read the resolution. I think it speaks much better than I could speak. And then I think we should have a round of some applause and a motion to approve this. So, resolution recognizing outstanding service. Whereas Regional Planning Commission staff must master the intricacies of federal and state laws that govern contracting, be equally adept at working with municipalities, engage the public in a variety of forums to foster ideas and move them to action, and perform multiple other duties. Whereas Daniel Currier has fulfilled these duties with uncompromising and unparalleled dedication during his 15-year career at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, CVRPC, and stands as a model for his colleagues to emulate. Whereas Dan Currier has been a constant presence at CVRPC through times of change, always willing to help where needed, and with pride in his ability to provide institutional and professional knowledge to aid in our service to the region's municipalities and stakeholders. Whereas Dan Currier has an uncommonly refined ability to leverage his vast trove of knowledge into a mentorship style that is at once supportive but also encouraging of those under his guidance to develop and strengthen their own capacity, making him not only a beacon of reference and advice, but also an integral resource to the continuing professional development of the staff. Whereas Dan Currier is the person road foremen know to call in times of need and a pleasure to work with, as noted by communities. Whereas Dan Currier has a unique ability to present information in a manner that ensures everyone understands that their piece of the pie entails. Whereas Dan Currier greeted his coworkers with a hello and smile, ensuring a smile in return and causing his peers to look to him for kindness and humor as well as guidance and knowledge. And whereas on January 17th, 2020, Dan Currier is concluding service with CVRPC. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, 1, honors Daniel Currier on a highly accomplished career at CVRPC, and 2, presents this resolution to him at the January 14th, 2020 Board of Commissioners meeting in celebration of his service, and with the best wishes as he transitions to a new career. So I won't read the last line because we haven't adopted it yet. So first I think we should give Dan a big round of applause. Very well written and so true.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. So at this point,
I'd like to move the resolution to be adopted.
okay, great. We have a motion. Okay, Alan's going to second. Great. Any more discussion?
I'd just like to say that on behalf of the town of Plainfield, you're going to be sorely missed by former and past select board members, the town clerk, and if I had my act together, you would be getting this card that they're all signing. Thank you so much for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Brad.
Town of Calais is going to miss you very much as well. You're a big help.
Any other comments, kudos?
We all will.
Yes.
All of them.
Yes.
All those.
All, yes.
I just wished you'd taken a job with the agency that was more connected to roads.
Dan might be sick of roads, who knows?
We need a good influence in there, Dan.
Thanks, Mama.
It's all right, buses run on roads. So, great. Any more comments or kudos? Okay, great. So we have a motion, and with a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I won't ask for okay, more abstentions. Great. Okay, so thanks again, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.
We really appreciate it. Great. So moving right along with the agenda, Jamie Stewart is here with us, and this is time for your report.
Time for my quarterly update. And I just make sure we leave a couple minutes just if there are any questions of what's going on. The big announcements that we've had most recently, obviously for I think both Northfield and Waterbury, we got really good news with the Darn Tough expansion that's going to basically replace the majority of the jobs that were lost in Currier over the next year. It's about 100 jobs that are going in there with Darn Tough in the initial phases of their plan. So along with some other office pieces that are going in there that are already committed to the space, it's Wayne Lamberton and Pat Malone are developing that property. Two good people to have developed. They've got a pretty good track record in this region for successful projects. But that, for Northfield, I think the fear was that they were going to lose something in this process. But bottom line is that Darn Tough is committed to the space and the facilities and the level of work that they've got going in Northfield. This is an expansion, a growth of their company. It is a sign of the fact that they are doing exceptionally well and are needing to grow their operation in a big way. We spent a lot of time working with them in this process, but Rick Cabot and his team showed real strong connection and support for keeping the business in Vermont. There were looks at other states and other regions, and some people made some pretty ridiculous offers to them, which they did not accept, and they continue to grow in Vermont. Wow. The biggest concern is, and this is true across the board for any of the employers in the room will attest to this, where we're going to find 100 people for them. That is going to be a significant piece of work that I've already started meeting with the folks at Department of Labor, Voc Rehab, to develop a program. We'll be bringing in CCV, Vermont Technical College, as well as some of the high schools to help develop students that have the skills that they're going to need. I'll be meeting actually with Darn Tough tomorrow to get a list of the jobs and the types of skills that they are looking for so that we can start developing something for that. But obviously in these tight labor market times, we know that that's going to be the hardest part for us to accomplish, but it's also the most important thing we can do for them because it's currently what is preventing them from growing more is an access to workforce. And it honestly is the reason, or a portion of the reason why they made the move to expand outside of Northfield because they have fairly well exhausted the workforce supply that's looking to work at Darn Tough. They have about 25 positions open today that they can't fill in Northfield. So they're going to continue to work to fill those positions, but it's a great move.
Starting wage is $15 an hour.
It's going to be just over that, and that's for first shift and second shift and third shift differentials. Add a couple bucks to that, and they, like every other manufacturer in the region, are moving their numbers up. Yeah, I will tell you, in the manufacturers in the region, we're seeing a move where 15 kind of has, over the last couple years, become the baseline for entry-level jobs in manufacturing. We're seeing that move to 16, 17.
Wow.
Creamery is already over 17 for starting entry-level jobs. In these companies, they're starting to really enhance their benefits packages as well. A lot of the companies are now offering, if they hadn't before, are including educational benefits. So they're paying for you to go to college while you go to work for them. So if you have a child in high school that's about to graduate and not sure what they want to do, I can tell you, I know 4 companies today that they could go to work for where they could get their bachelor's degree paid for 100% by the company. That's the kind of thing that you're starting to see around here. And I think that'll be good for those companies, both in the development of their workforce, but also for the workforce themselves, those individuals getting that level of skills that will help really enhance the workforce that we have in the region. But we're really seeing the businesses stepping up. Staying on the workforce development side of it, I did a program with the work-based learning coordinators at the 5 sending high schools to do an advanced manufacturing day where we brought them all together from the 5 school students from all 5 schools. Brought in 8 entities, 7 manufacturers to talk to the students about what it meant to be in a manufacturing operation, what the skills were, what the wages were, what the types of jobs were, the full breadth, so that students understood that these manufacturers have people that are making stuff. But there's also the office folks that have to run the business. There's the transportation folks, the logistics folks. There's all kinds of levels of business skill needed in the different businesses and for different levels of educational attainment. So we brought them together for the Advanced Manufacturing Day in concert with the Generator out of Burlington, who is currently managing the mobile lab that Vermont Technical College has, which has some really neat toys on it, which we brought them in, and we're talking CNC lathes and laser cutters and 3D printers. And the students spent half of their day meeting with the businesses, talking about career opportunities, doing career exploration, in some cases interviewing with the companies for potential employment. And the second half of that day was spent in working with these manufacturing equipment to learn how the things are done. And they went out the door with a piece in their hand. It's something that they had built that day. It was nice. We had a good crew, and we are going to be actually doing that a second time. It was so successful, we're going to do it again in April. We're going to hold it at the Berry Granite Museum and put a focus on the Berry granite industry as part of it, but we will have other manufacturers as well. If you know anybody who might want to be participating in this with us, then please have them get a hold of me. Looking to expand. One of the things that happened with the schools is they had brought students that were part of their work-based learning career exploration programs. The STEM teachers heard about it, and they want to be part of this too. So we know schools that brought 5 students last time are planning to bring 15 to 20 to the next event. Times 5 schools, and possibly Morrisville as well is coming. They came to our last one as well. They're close enough. We'd like to bring them in and have them participate in the process as well. But it is increasingly a focus that we have on workforce development, because again, that's the issue that every business is coming through the door and asking us about and looking for help with. Just a quick note, if you don't know Michele Francis, who's at Spalding, who's the work-based learning coordinator there, know that we are lucky in this region because she is an absolute rock star in the work that she's done. And it's through my relationship with her that we broadened this out to the other schools. But Michele has been just really leading this charge in a fundamental way and doing it with a great deal of humor and enthusiasm and energy, which has made my job significantly easier. So publicly, every chance I get, I am giving her the kudos she much deserves. And with that, if there's any questions on things that you've seen going on that I might be able to respond to? Hearing no things, just another quick note of admiration for a job well done. Bonnie has been leading for this region the Working Communities Grant Committee for the application process. We were successful to get chosen to go to the second round of interviews, which we conducted earlier this week. I think this group fared particularly well in that. I'll let Bonnie give you the details and really give you the story, but the background to it is that there was an excellent job of organizing the cats and herding us all in the proper direction and coming up with, I think, a strategy that the committee that's reviewing these was impressed with the level of depth and specificity that we had already achieved, when many of the communities were coming in with much more general kind of ideas and concepts that they were going to develop a plan on. We're already 3 to 4 steps ahead of what a number of them are, and that was commented on by the committee during our presentation, that they were surprised at just how far down the road we had gone and how much we had accomplished in a short amount of time. But that's both kudos to the people that are involved and the willingness that people have to collaborate and coordinate, but also just to the management of the process that Bonnie's put in there, and it's gone exceptionally well, accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. And then the final thing is, I hope you guys are keeping a close eye on what's going on with the Act 250 process in the legislature this session. We will be watching it closely. I think in the latest iteration, hopefully you guys give it a good look, because there are some pieces for, particularly in downtowns where we have good zoning, that will help streamline some of the process for the towns in a reasonable way, where you're still getting the public input, but without some of the costs and timelines associated and the duplication that sometimes occurs as part of Act 250. There's probably a couple poison pills in there as well for people, That's the legislative process that'll go through next. But I think for like Berry Town, needs to look at the fact that the industrial park potentially would be designated as one of those growth centers and would then have a favorable process for Act 250. That's something the RDCs have collectively been asking for. We go through a lot of review when we build these parks. There's fairly set standards that are structured into them. We'd like to be able to continue in that process, keeping it streamlined, and as in the downtowns where the same kind of thorough process has already occurred, to have that eliminated. So I would like this to be an area where we can find common ground between the RDC and the RPC, maybe be able to jointly go to committees with support for, if not all of it, for aspects of the proposals that are out there that we can all commonly agree with.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Any questions people have at this point?
Is Plainfield part of one of the towns that's the Twinfield? Are they participating in that?
Yes.
Great.
Yep. All 5 sending schools from the region that the RPC and the RDC cover are included in it. As I said, we've extended it. Folks in Morrisville asked if they could be a part of it, and why not? But that's been one of the things that it's really, and again, that goes back to Michele, has been really good about bringing those people on board. And at this point, particularly U32 and Harwood have gotten extremely active in the events that we scheduled and put together became the catalyst for them doing some other things on their own where they're also combining. So when they come to visit with a business and they want to do career exploration with students and they bring them to a business, now instead of having 5 schools come to your business and ask you for a day of your time to introduce students to your careers, we're going to bring all 5 schools, so you get it done in one shot. So there's an efficiency that we're bringing to the businesses in the process. But that's part of the goal that I had to the businesses. Look, I want you to be engaged. You need to be engaged, but let me make this as easy as possible for you to be engaged so we're not disrupting your business in the process any more than we have to. So.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. Good. So, so Sue found us. That's great. So I'd like to introduce you, Sue. Sue Minter is here. Sue's the Executive Director for Capstone Community Action. I've known Sue for many years. She was a very active member of our Planning Commission in Waterbury, lives in Waterbury, and I have a confession to make. We're in a musical group that's going to perform as part of our Winterfest, all humorous stuff. In fact, one of our songs blends coffee and socks. So there you have it. As we say goodbye to Currier, bring on the socks.
Out with the old, in with the new.
In with the new. So we have a, Sue has a presentation
we'll do the video
that we're lining up here on the community needs assessment and activities. So
yeah,
we're getting set up. Sue, you take
great.
Over.
Well, I'm just so honored to be here with so many of you, many familiar faces, and I guess I've been before your committee over many years wearing different hats. And I'm particularly thrilled, really privileged to be now coming as the Executive Director of Capstone Community Action, which was formerly known as the Central Vermont Community Action Council, CVCAC. I'm so glad to be asked to come because many people don't know who we are or what we do. Some people don't even know that we were rebranded into Capstone. I'm there exactly 1 year. And it's been a year of tremendous discovery. And what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of who we are, what we do, and a strategic planning process that we went through in the last year. And I have a little video to share at the end and hear from you about any questions that you may have. And I also want to say congratulations, where'd Dan go?
He just
well, that's fine. I'll get him when he comes back. But also, I want to reiterate what Jamie said, because I was part of the team that had the opportunity to interview for the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston Working Community Challenge Grant. And if it weren't for Bonnie, we would probably not have been there at all, and certainly not have been organized. And I really think you all, I'm sure you know, but I want to give you assurance that you have a tremendous asset in your leader there, and she did exactly what she's supposed to. So some of you may know, but some of you may not. I'm a planner. I used to be the planning, at the planning, what was my name? I was the community, downtown revitalization and community planner. And not only that, but I was on the planning commission with Steve for about 8 years, so he's had to put up with me for a lot. Okay, so thank you to Bonnie for that and for inviting me. What's great is this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and then our strategic planning process. So we actually cover central Vermont broadly defined, which means that it is Washington County, Lamoille, and Orange, and even a couple towns in Windsor. And that is a federal designation. The community action agencies were born out of the war on poverty. Capstone was founded in 1965. And really since then, some have floundered and others have evolved. And there's in the state of Vermont, there's a network of 5 community action agencies. So we've got Capstone in the middle. We've got the Chittenden Valley CVOEO, Office of Economic Opportunity, covers Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, and Addison. We have all of the Northeast Kingdom in NECA. We have SEVCA, Southeast, which is Windsor, Wyndham, and Brock, Bennington Regional, Bennington and Rutland. So we are 5, and like you are, how many, 12 or 11? 11. So our regions are bigger. And our missions are quite different. And I don't know that there's a good understanding and relationship between regional planning commissions and community action agencies, but there should be. And Bonnie started coming to one of the collaborative groups that we're a part of all the social service agencies, and I've been sort of, sharing the opportunity that she has to help be a part of the leadership of this region, and it's been great. We do, every community action agency is its own private nonprofit. We do have some federal grants, primarily federal, some state as well, and we rely more and more on philanthropic investments. We have 5 offices, really. There's 3 that you're mentioned here. So our largest office is in Barrie. Love to have you come and visit. Some of you have paid us a visit. We also have a pretty new 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old center in Lamoille, and a very small office in Randolph. Add to that a preschool in Barrie City, and our Morrisville Lamoille Integrated Service Center is also preschool. And then we have Head Start offices in Barrie. So there's actually 5 different facilities. We are an organization of 170 employees with a myriad of programs, which I'll describe quickly. Next, please. Ooh. Crisis services. So probably the most critical work we do is actually meeting basic needs. Hunger, shelter, food. In my office in Barrie, you would probably be surprised, I am shocked daily, that sometimes before we open at 8 o'clock there's actually a line forming. But throughout the day it is usually a relatively full, sometimes over capacity, and there's about 50 people who can fit in our waiting room, waiting for our food shelf, where we also do support for 3 Squares. Our crisis fuel, you've probably heard of LIHEAP, the federal crisis fuel. We actually implement getting people fuel who are eligible. There are very strict eligibility requirements in special pots of money, but I'm going to mention a few times that right now we are in the middle of our Fuel Your Neighbors campaign. We are trying to raise in 100 days $200,000 to support people who go cold or hungry without the services that we can provide them. And because of the restrictions around heat, someone who might have an empty tank, can only ever get it filled up once. When people come to our door, we do not want to turn them away. And if it weren't for philanthropy, we would be. And some of our cohorts across the state do, but we try very hard not to. You can see our food shelf, nearly 4,000 folks last year, fuel 2,500, and then we do housing and homelessness prevention. We have 9 kind of emergency shelters, transitional housing units in City of Barre. In our 3 counties, we are involved in the network of housing service providers in something called the Continuum of Care. We're the lead agency. So we literally triage on a weekly basis who is in crisis and where might they go. Not an easy decision to be having to make, because I'm sure you won't be surprised, or maybe you will. There's a much greater demand than availability of appropriate housing. Next. So those are sort of the crisis services that we support. And we also really try to make sure we have stability in families. Probably our flagship program is Head Start. That is early education from families 0 to 5. In our preschool in Barre City, we have 2 classrooms for kiddos 0 to 3 and 2 classrooms for 5-year-olds. And on the top floor, we have a pregnant and parenting teen center. So students who are pregnant and drop out of school come to us and are able to get their diploma on a timeline that works for them. They get individualized attention and testing, etc., and exposure not only to education but to parenting counseling. Once their child is born, they have childcare there, lactation consultant, parenting consultants. I want to explain that the families we serve are dealing with tremendous trauma, and to be eligible for Head Start, you either have to be at or below the federal poverty level, and we'll talk about that later, but I consider that extreme poverty. You might have families in substance abuse or misuse. You might be homeless or in foster care or in corrections, families in corrections. So we often have kiddos who other child cares have refused to take, and we don't refuse our kiddos. And the demand is high, the need is high. 30% of our families are homeless, our kiddos. Never been like this before. But the other piece of sort of what we call family supports, home supports, is our weatherization program. Very significant program where for eligible households we insulate the home and do basic weatherization. And this not only cuts often in half the heating bills, but also is contributing to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and consumption from energy that is essentially being leaked out of the doors. A couple other programs. This one people barely know about, the Child Care Food Program. We actually cover a territory from Bridgewater to the Canadian border, providing food, nutrition, really reimbursements for home care providers. So very rural families going to home care providers are able, through our work, to get federal USDA money to reimburse them for nutritious food. Really important, little-known program. Next. So what's next? Next, we have a whole program around what I call financial empowerment. This is something that I think we really are working with our partners on. Not just how do we make sure people are out of crisis and their families are stable, but how do we really move people out of poverty? And I feel that our financial empowerment programs are really that piece of the story. We have a very successful micro business development program. You probably actually are customers at some of our businesses that have come to us for one-on-one counseling, for years of counseling throughout their growth of their business. A lot of our families are single moms wanting to start a business, and we help them get on their way. We also fundamentally do financial coaching. So many of our families and our participants really do not have a good understanding in basic budgeting, in what's coming in, what's going out, how to get out of debt. We help people get out of debt, how to establish credit, how to establish their assets and their savings. We have a Vermont matched savings program, so when they put money towards education, transportation, or housing, we can match it dollar for dollar with support from our philanthropic efforts and the state of Vermont. We do tax preparation, unbelievable. We have one FTE. We have over 50 volunteers who last year did 1,800 tax returns that contributed to over $1.2 million coming to those recipients in taxes that might otherwise not have been collected, and then are going into our local economy. So an incredible program. One person does significant work. Next. So every 3 years we do a community needs assessment, and generally this is my first year. I just happened to come on the year where we had to do planning. Surprise, surprise. And it usually is just a socioeconomic analysis, but we went a little further this year. We did a very significant survey. We had over 1,200 participants in our survey. Maybe some of you did that through, we used Front Porch Forum, in addition to other things. And then we had something called a SWORD event. We did something called appreciative inquiry. I don't know if that's a familiar term, but it's really looking at strength-based approach to planning, and I'll go into that more next. So what did we learn about poverty in the United States and here in our region? Again, this is looking at the 3 counties that comprise, quote, central Vermont. If you look at the decade, you see the federal poverty line has gone up around the Great Recession and then gradually gone down. Vermont's line is a little different, definitely was peaked and came down a little, but what I really want to point out is it's going back up. It's going in the wrong direction. It's going in a direction that is in the inverse of the rest of the country, and that worries me.
And what do you attribute that to since 2015?
Why don't we have that good question and conversation over time? I think there's lots of things we could talk about, but this is just sort of big aggregate data, and it again is the number of people under the federal poverty line. Next. And I want to talk about what does the federal poverty, go ahead, mean, and how do we look at it. So the definition of poverty above the feds is for a single individual to earn $12,000. So, and then that goes up. Family of 4, 20, or family of 2 is $24,000, and that determines eligibility for all kinds of programs. But then you start to look. Can you do one more? Because I think there's something here. This is what is defined in statute as a Vermont livable wage. And that is what every year the Joint Fiscal Office of the legislature actually does an analysis of what does it cost to live in Vermont. What does it cost for one person, or a basic needs budget for 2 people with no children? What would be the wage? And as you can see, it is more than twice what we consider poverty by the federal definition. Now all of our programs go off of this definition. And what you can see when I think about the affordability gap, it's really this. How do people live if they are only if they're working full-time at the federal minimum wage or the Vermont minimum wage, but actually this is what it costs to live. Okay, go on. So I just feel like that's really important. So that's why when I talk about the federal definition of poverty, which is what we call the poverty line, is really extreme poverty. So we've got, go ahead, the overall, what do the numbers really mean? So in our entire report location, it went from 9 to, it increased, it increased by about 2%. So it's not a significant data point, but it is a significant number of people. We've got, you know, almost 10,000 people, close to 10,000 people at the federal definition of poverty, in extreme poverty. And the numbers, as you can see, the numbers are higher here. But you really want to look, obviously, at the rate. And then where is it going? It is going up the highest in Washington County. Oh, sorry, 2.7. Yeah, next. So we learned a lot, and we have reams and reams of data, but I'm really giving you the high points that concern me greatly. This is the thing that concerns me the most, because 20% is at the national average. I mean, when you usually look at where does Vermont rank in terms of poverty statistics, we are nowhere near the national average. We're in much better conditions generally, but not so for children, very young children here. That concerns me greatly for them and for their future. And that's probably why, for example, 30% of our Head Start kiddos are homeless right now. This is obviously what Jamie was talking about, educational attainment. 37% of our region, again, that's 3 counties, are not going beyond high school. Well, we know that 2/3 of the jobs require some kind of certification beyond high school, so we've got a major problem and a gap. Low-income women earning less, go ahead. The drop in home ownership rates, go ahead. And high demand for housing. We have less than 1% vacancy rate. And then what are people paying for their rent? In Orange County, 51% of the renters are paying 30% or more of their income. That tends to be where the feds key rights, what they call affordable housing. But in Lamoille and Washington, 47%. Oh, but is there one more? Because there's no. Okay, but here's where I think we might get it. So, no, you go ahead. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
So the next thing was really of our 3 counties, Lamoille is in the greatest state of challenge. The lowest median income of the 3 counties. Now that includes this town of Stowe. So for me, that is quite a shock. Highest poverty rate next. Highest child poverty rate, highest number of aging Vermonters, highest rate of uninsured, highest unemployment. And here's what I was about to say, 28%, more than a quarter of the people who are lucky enough to be renting are paying more than 50% of their rent, their income on rent. I mean, it is just an incredible, difficult situation, and it worries me greatly. Oh, and in Lamoille, there's no vacancy rate. So, onward. Thank you. So we did, in addition to crunching the numbers and thinking about what's important to us, what do we learn? We did ask people for what did they feel was the most important thing that we should be working on. And again, we did a survey, and really happy that when we use the word customers here, that means our participants in our program. We did a very intensive outreach to the folks who we serve, because frankly, we believe we shouldn't be making decisions without them, and frankly, they should be driving the way that we look at problems and try to solve them. The members of the community at large, 300 partners like you would be a partner, staff, and board members. So we feel really great, like it's the most we've ever had for a survey response. Next. And we learned a lot, but I'm just going to give you the highlights. Probably not too surprising. What are the top issues? Number 1 is housing. Number 2, transportation, health and mental health, food, jobs. So then we wanted to go further to engage our community in thinking about our strengths and our future direction. And so we did this appreciative inquiry approach. We did hire a Waterbury resident, Prue Sullivan. Do you know her? Anyway, this woman was a Green Mountain Coffee Roasters back in the day when it was called Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. She worked there in their strategic planning and HR. And then she got off onto this whole discussion of what is appreciative inquiry. So she talks about strategic planning. We often aren't necessarily looking for strengths. We do generally a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, this is a SOAR, strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And there's a whole world of thinking about this, and actually Champlain College's has a whole department or institute, I guess, the Cooper Rider, I think it is, and she was a part of that. And I'll just give you the greatest example that sticks with me is she said, you think about a hospital doing a strategic plan or analysis of its challenges, and it's looking at 2 wings. One wing has high infection rates, and the other wing has 0 infection rates. So everybody's trying to go figure out what did we do wrong with the high infection rate. Well, actually, sometimes the answer is what did we do right in the 0 infection rate? Like, what are we doing well? How do we really capitalize on that and grow that? That's sort of the big concept. So we had a whole nother outreach strategy where we did these intensive, yeah, this is telling you that. We did discovery interviews. So we interviewed 115 people for like 20 minutes. The we is we had a core team, and it was a very intensive sort of 4-month process, and we interviewed staff and board, and most importantly, our participants, to really learn from them what is it that what are our strengths and what are some big ideas about what we could be doing in the future. And then we had a summit, I called it, in June. Were you at the summit? Yay. Okay, and Bonnie was there. Thank you. So again, so we had it at the old Labor Hall, which is right across from Capstone. And if you haven't been there, I hope you get to go. It's a great community. We also, I don't think I mentioned, one of our big programs is called the Community Kitchen Academy. It's a workforce development program. I'll mention it later. You'll hear about it in the video. But most importantly, they fed us. But what was, I think, really rewarding and important was that we had a lot of participants at this. So not only did they attend, but I think they were really given center stage to share their experience. And I think that was really different. Every one of our tables, so keep going, I think we'll have a picture. So here we are on the day. And it's a packed house, and that meant a lot to us right there. We had no idea if anybody was going to show up. Who cares about Capstone? But enough people did. Cares about poverty. Enough people do. Go back for a second. So we had the room full, and at each table was, partner, staff, board, and participant. So I think it was really intentionally divided so that folks would really hear a diversity of viewpoints. Go ahead. And the day was obviously very intentional. We also had what they call a graphic recorder. So as we were meeting, some of you may have had this, but this wonderful artist was like putting it all together for us. Go ahead. We had really great stories from some of our clients. This is a woman named Christy. She tells a very powerful story about how much being at the Community Kitchen Academy has changed her life, coming from poverty and homelessness and pregnancy and abusive relationship, very common, by the way, all 3 of those. And that the strength that she got not only to believe in herself and get a job, but to leave her abusive partner and have a life for herself. Very moving. We talked about what are the big ideas. Go ahead. What are our opportunities? And then we kind of got to the end of the day, and this I feel like some really cool ideas, because we said, okay, in 3 years, what's a headline in your area of interest that's really going to show that Capstone's made its mark? And some very interesting ideas came out of that, one of which I'll tell you about later. Next. So I guess some themes that really we learned about our strengths is that we treat people with respect and dignity. People who come in our doors often don't find that in their lives very often. There's a lot of stigma around poverty. Empowerment, that we're about giving folks with such disadvantage actually the opportunity to share their voice and their ideas. That we're about partnership and collaboration, which is why it's so great to be here, because you are a key partner for us. That we have a holistic view of poverty. I had no idea what this organization did before I started interviewing and learning more for the job. And the first 4 months I started, learning and meeting and thinking, whoa, we do way too many things. Like, that's crazy. We should do fewer things really well. And after this SOAR event, I realized it's exactly the opposite, because poverty is extremely complex, it's complicated, it's multifaceted. And what's unique about Capstone is that we actually do see the whole family. We're not just working on housing. We're working on housing and early childhood care and finance. And I think that that helps us sort of do more in a broader sense, and that we're committed to equity and justice. Okay, next. So we started looking from that. Our strategic plan really talks about some key priorities, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about transportation. We used to have a program that helped people get into their cars, help people fix their cars. It was related to a state-funded program in Reach Up. It got cut. We had to cut the program, so I'm very happy that we have re-established that program. I'll tell you a little more about it later. We want to focus on Lamoille County for obvious reasons. These are all things that, 4 months ago we set out to do, and now we're underway. Next. That we really want to do more communication with folks so that people know we're there, and help mobilize volunteers more effectively. Go ahead. And this is something, we want to bring. I'm very focused on the next generation of leaders. Our agency, kind of like the state of Vermont, a high percentage of folks are like leading in the next 5 years towards retirement. And I'm worried that a whole generation of young people who care about social action have no idea that we're there. So this is something I'm trying to get my board to buy into. The census. So the census is coming. The census is coming. Every 10 years, we have a chance to tell the government how many people we are. And everything depends on that. The road dollars you invest depend on how many people are in your census count. The amount of money we get for helping people get food stamps, for housing vouchers, for your special education in your schools, all these federal programs depend on our number in our census count. And we are committed to working as hard as we can with every partner to put 2020 is kind of a big year. There's a little bit going on, and people may not be thinking about the census. So we're making it our business. I raised money to hire an organizer to have a statewide campaign. Obviously, the core network is our CAP agencies, all of whom coordinate with all other social service providers. But we would love you, if you're not already, to be a part of the Census Everybody Counts campaign. Our organizer just got hired literally this week. So we're just getting started. We'll be back. I really hope you'll consider in every one of your towns having someone in every library, in every town office building, having it really clear that you've got to fill out your census. Everything depends on it. And I never understood that the way I understand that now. So I hope that we will continue to soar together. It's been an amazing journey this 1 year of being a part of this organization. Go ahead next. And this is my favorite, one of the things that she wrote about us. So I do have a video that I want to show you because part of what I'm committed to do is to grow the impact of our work. And we do a lot through grants, and do we have it or no?
Yep. Oh, it's on right there. There we go.
All right, let's see if we can get it up there to YouTube. See if the volume is loud enough. Go for it. Let's see. You have to have the volume all the way up.
What's up?
Got the speakers turned on?
The speakers on, Nancy?
Oh, no. Gotta hear it.
Can you pause the video for a moment?
Pause it. Hold on.
We figure out?
And I can go back.
Thanks. I bet we must have some technical people. I'm not one of them.
On my tea, so, you know.
While we're figuring out the tech, the transportation program I do want to mention because this is part of, Bonnie, I don't know how often you talk about the things we do, but we're part of a network called Thrive, a collaborative action network. And many of you know, and many of you with me, have been doing transportation for a long time. And it's been really, I know that, I was Secretary of Transportation, I was on the Transportation Committee, I worked really for 20 years to increase our investment in our transportation system, and specifically also including public transit. We almost doubled our investment and our ridership in a 10-year period. But now I'm in this work and realizing it absolutely doesn't scratch the surface of need for people in poverty. So we're hearing a lot about climate and how transportation is like the largest contributor of greenhouse gases in Vermont. But it's also the largest the greatest barrier to people getting out of poverty. And I am very focused on thinking about ways to do things differently in terms of not relying on fixed route services. So one of the big ideas that came from our SOAR, that last exercise, was, you know, in 3 years the headline's going to be Capstone celebrates its 100th cooperatively owned electric vehicle. And so we've got this big idea that we want to start a car share or a cooperative fleet of electric vehicles that when they are, instead of being parked, so I'm going to ask you to hold. Do you think we have the sound? No.
I'm just trying to play with the sound.
Huh. I wonder if it has to do with the YouTube.
Did you try it before? Was the sound working?
Oh, no, I just loaded this at 6:30.
Yeah. This was a last minute
So
deal.
we
But did
can
she send you
send out a
two
link
things?
After the
Did she
meeting.
send you two things?
To the video. Did,
Because it could be that the other thing she sent you would work better.
okay, well, Pam, I'm gonna read to you what you can load by, like, what you can type in.
Oops, what was that?
Oh,
Oh,
that's me.
that was you?
Yeah, but that did sound like something.
No.
Huh. Why would it not
Nancy, I
work?
wanna say we ran into this as a previous meeting where we could
Oh, what
see
was that?
things.
I just switched back. I don't know.
Now I've left.
We receive TV via rabbit ears at home. It's a lot like this.
So we are thinking about a big transportation idea that combines, you know, the interest in electric vehicle expansion with sort of the ride hailing, think of Uber and Lyft, or the rural Uber, we like to call it Ruber. But so that when these cars are not being used by their, you know, cooperative owners, they're actually being used to service the folks who are literally trapped in poverty without the ability to get to childcare, to get to the store, to get to work. And so this is an idea that in our Thrive, so Bonnie and I are co-leaders of a sort of transportation subcommittee or collective action. It's called a CAN. Yeah. So I'm just sprinkling it out there because when I'm really committed to trying to make this happen. I'm so sad this may not happen. But maybe we should ask for questions or comments while we wait. I hope we get to see it because it's a really good video. Yes, sir. And can you introduce yourself?
Sure, Bram Tobin from Plainfield, and I was just wondering, are you guys managing the pit count for homeless people right now?
So we don't manage it as the Agency of Human Services point in time count, and it's literally one. So we're part of the count, but it's really all goes into the Agency of Human Services. And I think it is helpful, and at the same time not that helpful, because it probably deeply underestimates and undercounts. And you know, we like to compare it to the year before, and I just don't think it's an accurate barometer because it's very hard to accurately count, and I think it's often apples and oranges. That said, we absolutely participate, and I think everyone should participate because it's the only count that we have.
Right, just in terms of money, I thought.
Well, so the money, it's really more almost an advocacy. In fact, tomorrow is Homelessness Awareness Day. If you're not busy at noon, you could be part of a vigil, or if you want to come to testify, all morning there will be testimony about homelessness, and they'll be talking about, the agency will present those numbers. And, you know,
do you have any feeling about if there's going to be a significant increase?
Well, we definitely see an increase in our area, and especially in children, and especially in Lamoille. Whether the full statewide count will show that, I don't know. But this problem is not going away. And I think it's very multifaceted. It's as multifaceted as the answer to John is, why is poverty going up? It's going up because we have obviously a substance abuse challenge. We have a mental health crisis. We have more and more families who aren't accessing work, and transportation becoming a major one, lack of housing a major one. So it's so multifaceted, and that's what I mean. There's not one magic bullet. What do we think?
Pam, will the,
Move on.
Yeah.
I think we will send you all the links after the
Please,
meeting.
yeah.
Do me a favor and watch the video. It's really good, and it's sort of the culmination of my year because I'm trying to do a lot of fundraising to make sure we get enough money to feed and people to heat their homes. And I went to a particular donor who said, yeah, I'm not going to give you money, but what I'm going to do is give you money to do a video because your stories are powerful. And this is people, our clients, telling their stories of our programs and what an impact they've had. Thanks for trying. Don't worry.
Would it be possible to include the email of the person who's doing the
Pam?
census?
Yeah.
Yes,
Will the,
absolutely. What I
thing fit in
hope
my
is maybe
computer?
you'll do a census subcommittee. We've actually
Will it fit in
created a
mine?
complete count committee
I would
for
have-
USB?
Washington County.
It's not a USB, I'd have to get it on the screen, I'd have to adapt,
oh, okay,
you know, I
yeah.
could use the speaker on your laptop, but I'd have to.
Yeah, I think we should just move on from the video. It's very distracting, so let's
You
just focus
That's
on
perfect, leave it at
some
that.
conversation, and we'll make sure to send the link out to everybody, so.
Yeah, and I'm sorry too, it was a last
Yeah.
minute thought.
That's
Oh,
okay.
So
we
if
should
you
show the
send
video.
us the census, the
Information,
count and
yes,
the information, we'll also spread it on our network.
great. And we're just getting started. So just so you know, the census sort of begins in the 15th of March with online. April 1st is Census Day. That is the first day and the big day to get people to start writing, filling out. And then they're going to have sort of neighborhood, the census is apparently hiring people. But we do not have confidence that this particular administration is going to be hiring enough people to actually get, especially to what we call the hard to count communities. And, those are the folks we serve. But everyone in your community you're part of this. So you are obviously key part of this, and you touch every town, so that's great. And did you even hear about the complete count committee meetings?
No, I haven't heard about.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
So that would be helpful.
That's a
Pam
mega
and
oversight.
our GIS folks have been working on Pam something. You did some preliminary work in census.
Yeah, just, it worked, we had to provide feedback on just some of the GIS shape files that
That the US
show the
Census.
boundaries of the blocks and the units, and just making sure that those align with and sent to them to the communities. Janet got some information and we had to.
So what we
do some
might do
updates.
is, if it's possible, get our census coordinator to come to a meeting for a subcommittee of some sort. Great, yeah. I'm so glad we even had this conversation.
We're past this date, but maybe a year and a half ago, we sent all your towns information. Towns have the opportunity to essentially identify new 911 structures, is the way I think we phrased it. As part of this complete count effort, what buildings should they go to? What addresses should they go to? And towns can come in and look at the information that the census currently has and recommend or basically make happen new counts. And as part of that, it turns out very few communities actually do that. They assume the state does it, and that's not true. It's you, the town, who puts that. And part of the advice was put all those seasonal homes on there, because between the time they show up on 911 as a seasonal home, they might have been converted to a permanent housing unit. And so they encourage communities to do that, and regional commissions were available to help towns vet that. I know that I think East Montpelier had a small committee that did that, and one or two other towns. It sounds like Berry City may have. But very few towns take that opportunity to actually help ensure that a complete count is done in their town. Because it's so far ahead of the census, you're not in census mode yet. But it's the prep work for it.
Okay, so let's see if anybody else, before we come back to you, Brian, anybody else have a question for Stu or a comment on this? Go ahead, Julie.
I'm Julie Potter. It's nice to see you again, Sue. You know I'm really always very impressed at the breadth, the incredible breadth that your agency has in trying to combat property, and it's the pride that people take in working with your constituencies, I think is also really impressive as well. You've mentioned Bonnie's work with Thrive and some of those interactions and how that's starting to bear some fruit. We just had a little discussion about the census, but I'm wondering if there's other ways that you think that are opportunities for an organization like Capstone to work with the Regional Planning Commission. I'm assuming that you're pretty familiar with what regional planning commissions do, and you know where there may be some opportunities that perhaps haven't been previously addressed. But you know, how can we work together to help Central Vermont?
Well, it's great to just be here, and I think the fact that we are collaborating on Thrive is step number one, and the fact that we just started talking about census is like, duh, we need to be having you guys on all this. And I haven't been necessarily thinking about all of that. I think it's naturally evolving. I think if we're successful with the Working Communities Challenge Grant, we will be working together, hand in glove. You know, there's another project we are kind of connected with, and this has to do with Berlin, but the Down Street housing is going through a permitting process, and childcare is part of the proposal there. So we are working to be a partner in that childcare center. So I know that they're going through designation of the neighborhood. So there's some planning stuff there that, you know, probably being in touch. But I will continue to think about that. And, you know, each group I've been, this is about my 8th presentation. And every time it's a new light bulb that goes off of how we need to connect. We're all so busy that we really don't think about how much we could do more together, and that's the purpose of Thrive.
If we could just solve this small transportation issue beyond
that will really bring us together.
I think we're good.
We've got some ideas cooking, so that's good.
Good. So other questions? Okay, yes.
Hi.
Go ahead,
Karen. I work for DEC, and one thing that we've started to look at is helping communities develop community wastewater systems. Like Washington is actually one area we've been thinking could benefit from that, which could in turn for these small rural areas help to maybe increase housing, because now you have capacity to add a bedroom or add an apartment. And but it's new, so we're like trying to figure out how it works, how we talk with communities. And I know the RPC is definitely willing to be a partner on it. But I wonder if that's something we talk about more, because it does take a big lift. There's federal money, and it just takes a lot of discussion.
So in a previous life, worked for the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, as it was called then, on decentralized wastewater and compact village and affordable housing and village centers. So I so concur with you, and it's not simple. I will say, having been in that world of housing, planning and development, what Capstone does is actually not the building of the housing, but really making sure the people find the right housing for their needs and opportunities. So it is a slightly different, I'm just really understanding, but we are absolutely in partnership. I would say we partner mostly with Down Street Housing in housing development, but to the degree our voice is helpful in all of those really important efforts, we would be happy to try to participate. We are definitely becoming participants in the conversation around climate change, and I guess part because our weatherization program, as I mentioned, gets us started in that, but so does the transportation work we're trying to do. And you know, it's very clear to me, and some of you may know I was sort of the Irene recovery officer after Irene, and I definitely experienced the fact that lower income Vermonters are kind of the worst hit and the hardest to recover. And to be in the eye of that storm and not be prepared and not have the resources, and Steve can obviously speak to that as well, that's what we want to be thinking about. So that's one of the other things, and that does get to planning and resilience and thinking strategically about where people are living and not in the confluence of the rivers.
So one of the areas we're about to knock on your door in is weatherization and a contact with Paul. for a Municipal Energy Committee and others roundtable on weatherization efforts. We often think of weatherization as a wintertime issue, and that's pretty strong, but with climate change, we're going to have to start thinking of it as a summertime issue as well.
I'll also say it's a health issue.
It's a health issue.
The significant improvement in health outcomes in families and homes that we are serving. You know, story of going to visit a home which was about to be weatherized, and a basement which is a dirt basement, and you know, the pipe literally you could put your finger through, and upstairs the kids are playing, so you know the air quality is not good. But you start getting to the Department of Health, and they are absolute fans of weatherization because of health outcomes, asthma incidents, so many factors that I hadn't thought about, but yeah. And I will say Capstone doesn't only support low-income weatherization. We actually also have a contract for-profit business. You know, we are a social enterprise, so any of you could contract with Capstone for efficiency and home performance through something called Energy Smart program.
Thanks,
Cool.
Sue. This was so great.
Thank you. There's so much I could share, but
So does Capstone reach out to towns in terms of town meeting funding?
some towns, absolutely, we do.
Because I'm looking at our warning and you're not on it, I'm wondering.
And I'll tell you
Did
why.
you receive something and missed it, or didn't?
So we used to do every town, or like a huge percentage of town, and we ran ragged and decided to narrow and just go with the larger towns. So Calais may be one of those who we used to, and you may have seen us in the past.
Yeah.
And this preceded me, so I'm not really involved in when and why, but I know that happened. But you're right, and thank you for even recognizing that.
We would have supported it.
Yeah.
It is often, from what you said, I would guess it is the petition requirement. Social service agencies under statute are required to get signatures on petitions to be on your town warning. And if you're petitioning for $200, $500, you spend more than that in staff
Yeah,
time.
well, select boards can waive that.
Select boards
And
can
we
waive
do.
that.
We don't put people through the mill. Another thing
Yes,
you
and
could
thank
do.
you for that.
But maybe we should get back
It's
to
not-
Calais.
It's not really too late. You could put together a general notice to all towns and find an advocate in every town to bring it to town meeting, and you can amend the budget on the floor to add in funding. And then,
Which, I love the idea, but I think
and then it would
what
force the conversation to, be some info attached maybe.
I think what Bonnie's pointing out to is probably our capacity to do it is just, it got crazy, so we decided to limit. But maybe it makes sense to go to some towns that we think we'd have more success.
Send it to CVRPC, they got the distribution list, they can fire it out for you.
Oh,
They
a
can
notice to
forward
all
it.
towns, but then we'd
Yeah.
have to be in every town.
No,
No.
No, you don't have
no, just
Oh, okay.
see if you can get it designated, it can be a regional planning commission.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I like that idea.
We'll do that.
I like that idea. And I would be remiss to not say fuelyourneighbors.org. We are halfway through our campaign. We, in the past, we raised $100,000 in 100 days, and this year we are doubling it, because last year we saw a 36% increase. And we're a little bit relieved. You know, many people here know I ski, and I am so excited when the snow and the cold comes, and not anymore, because what it's like for people to be cold and how many people are really cold. And that reality is, winter means a different thing to me now, and it's very real, and it's very present, and it's very much your neighbors. Have an eye out for your neighbors. Some people feel a lot of shame asking for help, but we are here. And so if you know of someone who could benefit, bring them in or make a phone call. So that's my last message. And thanks so much for being here and doing your work.
Great, thanks so much, Sue, for coming.
Yeah.
Great, so we
Come
have,
see us all sing on what night is it?
it's Wednesday, the 27th of January in Wassailing in downtown Waterbury. We got a great Java Jive with socks for you. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of different groups that sing. It's just a fun thing. So let's move right along. We've got a short item, and then we're going to get to the Clean Water Advisory Committee letter of concern. I know a number of you are here for that item. So we have the election of secretary, treasurer, and appointment of executive committee member at large. This follows up on the bylaws, which we just approved recently, where we modified the officer positions to combine the secretary, treasurer. And Bonnie, can I get you to take the lead on this? That would be great if you could, and if you have a page for us to
Page 19
turn
of your
to.
packet
Right. Okay.
is the memo. So what the bylaws did, among other things, or are you taking it? 18? Sure,
So,
18.
18, yeah, one page
Page
before.
18.
There we
I
go.
gave it,
Okay.
but you're
Good,
right.
good, okay.
The bylaws took the secretary treasurer position, two positions, and put them together as one position. And currently, Michael Gray is the treasurer, and Dara Torre is the secretary. What the bylaws did was say, make that one officer position and convert the remaining position to a member at large. And so as part of that, your bylaws went into effect upon adoption. So technically, we have one position and two candidates to fill one officer position and one member at large. So the executive committee talked about it, and perhaps with those two candidates, and made a recommendation that Dara be appointed to the secretary-treasurer position and have the honor of signing checks and all those kinds of things. And Michael offered to serve as the member at large on the executive committee through the remainder of the fiscal year 20 term, so through June 20th, and then you have your normal annual elections and things like that. So that was the executive committee's recommendations to bring us into alignment with what the bylaws say now.
So, Jerry,
So move.
okay, so we have a motion, and this is to appoint Dara Torre as secretary treasurer and Michael Gray as member at large on the executive committee for the remainder of the FY20 term. So Jerry moved, and do we have a second?
Second.
Oh. Okay, Bob, great. Okay, good, Bob, second. Multiple seconds. Okay, great. Any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great, okay, and thank you, Dara, for stepping forward, and Michael for continuing as a member at large. So the next item is on the next page. This is a letter that has been brought to us by the Clean Water Advisory Committee, and this is raising concerns about water quality. And Amy Hornblast is here. Amy, maybe you can find a chair at the up at the table, and we've got a couple open spots here, and people are welcome to come and join us around the tables. Just you know, if you think you're going to have some comments, that's fine. So I'd just like to introduce this topic. Amy was good enough to join us at the executive committee meeting a week ago yesterday on the 6th, and we talked about this issue. We talked about the letter. We also have Karen Bates here, and for those of you who've been with us for a little while, Karen was the A&R staff member involved with the Winooski River Basin Plan. Did I get that all right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. And so we had, I think, 2 meetings where you presented. The plan was approved back 2018, is that right, Karen?
Yep.
Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Okay, so the basin plan was approved. The Clean Water Advisory Committee has some concerns around water quality issues and have put together a letter. The letter was brought to the executive committee. The committee is an advisory committee, so any action on this item, which at this point is, I think, more at a policy level, requires approval by the Board of Commissioners. So I think what I'd like to do, well, we've got about a half hour, is have Amy go through the letter. And I know some of this is I don't know quite what the right word is, a little controversial or testy. What I would ask is that we all be respectful. We want to welcome comments and questions. Just ask people to speak one at a time. We're usually very civil. Let's just follow our usual process. And if we need more time, we can always continue this. We can continue it to another meeting. So I just wanted to let people know we don't necessarily have to take action tonight. If we need more time, that's fine. We can put it on the agenda perhaps for the next board meeting. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Amy, as chair. There's essentially a cover memo, and then there's, is that right? There's the rules of procedure, and then the letter, just to kind of show you what's in the packet, in case you haven't been through it yet. So on page 19 is the memo with the action requested, and then the advisory committee's rules of procedure, so you can see that. And then starting on page 23 is the letter itself. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Amy.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to say two quick things, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Donna. I'm just so glad. I'm so glad you're here, Karen, because my only regret is that in the letter we didn't start off by saying, obviously, no offense to folks who worked hard, and you worked exhaustively. You met with us exhaustively. We understand that the format for this tactical basin plan was laid out by the federal government. You were told you had to focus on phosphorus, and so absolutely you followed, what your directions were, and so absolutely no offense to that. We just wish that they had come with a broadened mandate or request for you, and so that's kind of who we're speaking to with this. And also, just so you know, I love this letter. I didn't write a word of it except for maybe just clarifying some of the conclusion. It was this team that wrote it, this committee, and I feel like even though we did spend a chunk of time at every meeting since April, not the whole meeting, obviously. I don't think any of us could have stood that, but the way we collaborated was amazing. It was a hugely valuable process. A lot of subjects were thoroughly discussed. People's voices were heard. The way we edited this together, I don't know if you've ever tried to edit something with a couple of people, but to have as many as we did, chip in fully on the process, and then fully get behind every word of it, for me that was thrilling. So, and it was very valuable. So if this letter doesn't go any further than that, I feel like it was a valuable process for us, and I want to thank the committee for all the hard work at the meetings and outside of the meetings too.
So is there somebody who could run through the letter? I think that might be helpful.
We have an introduction planned and everything.
Okay, good. And maybe you could come up to the table if you're going to speak to the letter. Donna, are you sort of the chair that we could?
I actually thought Amy was going to do it, but she's.
I don't want to shy.
Oh no, no, sorry. I'm just going to position. No, you're fine. I'm short. I'll stand over here. People can not see me over your heads. I just wanted to give you an angle to think about, at least how we approached it. When we looked at the basin plan, and actually we looked at two, we really looked at, what's the purpose of the basin plan? It's that simple. What would you say is the purpose of the Winooski River Basin Plan?
Improve water quality, reduce phosphorus.
Now, what I might say is cleaner, but ultimately it's clean water. All types of water, in the lake, runoff, groundwater, surface water, it's clean water. So when we looked at our charge, that was our focus. And I sat around the table of people with such professional smarts in this field. I was sort of a process person, but I learned a lot. But the ultimate simplicity of it is clean water. And we read through all these reports. Amy gave us a lot of direction, and then Emily was just so much there, and Pam, so much there all the time with information, all the resources we got from the state and from the water organizations,
maps. I mean, they really educated us, and they gave us choices. But sometimes, as often happens, you, as a commission, and I know me on the TAC of this commission, we make recommendations to the Agency of Transportation, and then they ignore us. That our opinion may be like 25%. And sometimes it's very hard to move the dial on specific wording. But the concern is, this basin plan is going to be sitting on the shelf. And it ultimately is going to become the Bible for how we get clean water. Now, we couldn't cure all the ills. And let me tell you, this group of smart people, they really saw a lot of the failings. But just given what we had, we still had some concerns that we felt were in our preview of our purpose, which was to give you and the state input about how a better way to get cleaner water. And that's the only purpose of this letter, is saying we've said this before, you didn't include it, we'd like you to have realization that the basin plan is really not complete without these concerns being addressed. Does that format make sense to people?
Well, can you explain something that might be helpful? The basin plan's been approved. So what do you see as, just as an overview of the goal of the letter?
We would hope it would become like an addendum.
Well, this is a policy commentary letter, so,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to find out what the purpose is.
These three people really have a much better vocabulary for explaining the specific pieces. And John's sitting over here.
And Ron.
Ron, yeah, I see a lot of familiar faces from our Clean Water Committee, that they really can talk line by line of the letter. Like if people have a concern, why did you make that statement? Then I think we have a panel of people here to help answer those questions. But I really wanted the group to understand what we saw as the purpose of the basin plan and what we saw the purpose of our committee.
So did you want to take any time to go through the letter? Or do you just want people to ask questions? What?
Yeah, I guess.
How would you like to approach
I guess
this?
if you have questions, you know, as far as what you said, that you know the basin plan was approved, we were part. I think we thought at first that we were part of the approval process because it was being presented to us, but in the end, we didn't vote on it. We weren't, you know, we didn't weigh in on. We gave some suggestions similar to these while it was being worked on, and that's how it just sort of went through. So we feel like this is our chance to have our say. We are a committee of yours. I don't know if you have faith in our process. You know, we can back all of these statements up if you have questions, but I mean, I would hope that you would have faith in your committee, and certainly we'd clarify anything, I mean, of course, and have a discussion. Yes.
I agree with a lot of things that are in here, but I don't know, I think what your question is, what are we trying to accomplish with this? And to send a letter in, if we agree that the things in here are correct, if this is what we should be doing something to accomplish this, and not just sending the letter in. So maybe we should be asking to have the plan withdrawn and redone. I don't know, but we should be asking for something other than just saying, here's where we disagree with the plan.
I think in a general context, I think the concern as we were working with the state, Karen's the state representative, our concern was that the plan appropriately addressed phosphorus. We know that's a big problem for Lake Champlain. It's a big priority for the state to grapple with that issue. But we understand, and Vermonters understand, that that's not the only pollutant we have going into our lakes and streams. And we thought that the planning directive was too narrow. And you know, at the same time, we were being told that we were being given some ownership of the plan. We felt like the parameters for what the state could consider were already locked in, and that we, despite our greatest efforts, we weren't able to get that information into the plan. I still to this day don't understand why that wouldn't happen. But so this was our best effort to at least get the information on the table. So from my perspective as one member of the committee, 10 years from now, someone's not going to say, my son's not going to say, man, my dad was a jerk. Why didn't he look at these issues? I know those were at issue 10 years ago and he didn't bring them up. We've raised them. They're in the plan is a document that people review and make decisions based upon. And if this is attached to the plan, if only in our office, if the state doesn't want to do that, we can then use it as one of the tools for planning going forward and maybe grant funding.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, is it two things you've just said? Donna said the purpose of the plan, the basin plan is cleaner water. John just said there's some ownership issues and it's just too narrow. You don't say that in that first sentence, that first paragraph. That should be in there. I think that would follow, then the things that follow in there, as I read this, I said there's something missing and I'm not sure what it is, but I think those are the two sentences that need to be in that opening paragraph.
Yeah.
Brad?
Yeah, I just want to make clear that I am very active in water quality projects in Plainfield, and we've had a number of them, and we are really very serious about water quality. It's very disappointing that the Agency of Natural Resources, while having us spend money and do all these things, has increased permitting for spraying of material on fields next to the Winooski. So I actually...
Agency of Ag.
Big Bird?
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about way. That's
yeah, and so for example, I was driving in the snow about 5 days ago on Route 2, and there was a truck spraying what I presume to be whey all over a field right next to the Winooski. Now, this section of the Winooski, by the way, is rated one of the worst in terms of water quality. So I just don't know that, I think that for a variety of reasons, and there are a lot of competing forces and so forth, I just don't know how serious the state is about the water quality issue, at least from the perspective of my town.
So the Agency of Agriculture regulates the land application of manure from farms, and they have an authority that they can waive land application rules requirements, i.e. you can't spread in the winter on snow. They can waive those limitations in an emergency case. So last winter, Secretary Julie Moore was right here, and you may remember, I peppered her with a bunch of questions about that. She's not the Secretary of Ag, but A&R, and they partner with Ag. Every single request to land apply manure on snow, every single one across the state was granted. Every single one was declared an emergency. And that's why I questioned, if every farm is having an emergency all at once every winter, which is, we understand, looking at records, some of us have looked at these, that every year we have an emergency, then the systems aren't adequate to deal with what these farms are generating and maybe climate change and all that. And these two agencies are not protecting the environment. And I also, I think there's going to be a new story out shortly that the Agency of Agriculture sent upwards of 70 referrals to the Agency of Natural Resources for enforcement of water quality violations by farms, and none of them, 0, have been acted on. So these are the dilemma that we're caught in. So I'm hoping that maybe from the grassroots, our committee's hoping that from the grassroots we can instigate some action at some level.
Yeah, back to the letter itself. If we approve the letter, send the letter, do we anticipate any action happening to it, or does it just get filed someplace in somebody's cubicle?
Well, to me, once it's sent, you follow up and you try to get leverage through it, but I'm
okay, yeah, that's what I was concerned about, is that, the letter of protest is fine, and I, totally agree with what your concerns are. My concern would be as to once the letter is sent, Does it just get put in the pitch pile?
I hope not.
It depends what we choose to do with it. Like there's a statement in here concerned about those Teflon type products, PFAs, PFOAs.
PFOAs.
I know that the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy is going to be taking up that very issue, I believe next week. The land application of sewage plant sludges that also contain these chemicals. So, for instance, you know, that's something that CVRPC could maybe enter into the record at that committee or at the legislature at some point in that discussion. You know, should we have, the staff now have a basis that we are concerned about these practices?
I think my question was more directed towards the basin plan. Rather saying, you know, do we anticipate any possibility of making changes to the basin plan based upon this letter?
Personally, no. My biggest hope is that by coming before you all, we're raising awareness right here. We raised awareness in our group. If somebody's head gets turned when they see this letter, that'd be fantastic. You know, but I'm more of a realist. But I'd be all for advocating for it to be used.
I really think that awareness is the primary goal here. If this can accompany the basin plan, there's suggestions, there's concepts, there's a few actions, but you know, whatever happens as someone uses that basin plan, maybe this will enter into their thinking.
I mean, we've never faced what we're facing now with climate change. And a lot of it really comes up right down to stormwater. We have to find ways to control stormwater. That's the key to everything in here. And that's what we really worked on. And so we wanted to educate A&R to the fact that, you know, this is important stuff. I mean, we've never been faced with this before. Everything that we've done in the past, you know, it has to be changed. And there's just not enough teeth in that basin plan to do that.
My personal feeling, similar to what the rest of the members felt, that if you just read this plan with no other knowledge, has no other background, it looks like the phosphorus is running in there from wherever. It's basically looks like the only problem. And you were reading this as somebody that didn't know anything I say about Lake Champlain. You just read it. Oh, well, once we take care of the phosphorus, and maybe it implies the phosphorus as seems to be coming from not, as we said in here, not even chemical fertilizers, where the problem will be solved. And I think personally, and I don't know about the rest of the committee members, we felt that the phosphorus is a problem, but it's not the only problem. It's not going to be solved by some of these regulations, because you have all the other stuff, as you point out here. You have, I went to a Geological Society of America, East of me, and one of the students, his advisor, he and I think I mentioned it to the committee, I think I gave it to Bonnie, he had discovered that there's huge inputs of phosphorus from in the fall when you get the rains and it washes the stuff has been there. However it got there is there. And if you don't address this problem, you may be washing, there may be enough phosphorus there, as we think here, legacy phosphorus, to completely, cover up or mask any reductions of what is going in now. And again, plus other things that would be in there. And I think my feeling was that this plan, phosphorus is important, but it has to address the unit, the whole thing. Phosphorus is a symptom, you say. It's also, as other pollutions, as maybe some of the chemicals getting in there. and other things. The letter is, as it started, we start off here, it's basically incomplete and clean in the plan. No committee members disagree with me. I got that the impression, I was feeling, it's incomplete and has not addressed. It looks, oh, if we take care of that problem, and yeah, that's it. And I think that was, I personally think that was mine, and maybe other committees' concern. So that's, no, and I guess we're stuck with, because it comes from the federal government, the word phosphorus. But we were trying to call attention, hey, this is not the only problem. So that's why we put the letter together, I guess.
Janet, did you have a comment?
I had a question. I have more of a process question. Well, the letter reads that it's a letter to us as commissioners from the QUAC of things that they've recognized, deficiencies, whatever you may call it. Would they submit the letter to whomever is their intention, or would the commission, i.e. Bonnie or Laura, be sending this letter? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Well, I guess that's a question for the committee. It's not really addressed to a certain entity. Do you anticipate that this would go to a specific agency like A&R with the state? Just what do you envision as far as if the Board of Commissioners would approve this, who would it be addressed to?
To start with A&R, and we've talked about other places it could go. I noticed that in the memo on page 19 that our action requested, we're not necessarily going to send it to other clean water advisory committees. That was discussed at the executive committee when we came to see you. But to start with A&R, and then we would see what kind of response we get and discuss it as a committee. I believe we'd prefer it comes from us, because we'd be the ones we'd want them to contact, for a follow-up, or, if they contacted you guys, you just have to call us.
But you're an advisory role.
Right. Are we allowed
to? Which the letter would be speaking on behalf of everybody here if it were endorsed. So that's my question is, can it come from them, or should it come from the regional commission, Bonnie, or Laura? I don't know.
It seems like it would be a stronger message if it came from the commission itself rather than the committee, if we choose to do that.
Yeah, I mean, generally, that's the objective of a committee is to present something to a board or commission, and it's the commission that would do the presentation. So we did this, but I think it's really up to the commission to present it to A&R and whoever else.
Just a question for A&R, would there be any possibility of reopening or revising the basin plan?
At this point, no. I mean, it will be reopened in 4 more years, or we'll start planning in another 3 years. So it's an iterative process, and on top, I mean, the basin plan is very specific to the list of impaired or stressed waters that we have at that point in time, and if anything comes up in terms of water quality issues, we have also a Vermont surface water strategic, our management strategies, which are broad-based. So it's like if there is an impairment because of toxins or because of chlorides or any of that, they have sort of this general, this is how we deal with it. These are the rules, regulations, the assistance that happens. So this is just one layer of protection that is available and it will be provided or could be provided once impairment's identified.
Bonnie?
So to be clear, the basin plan starts with thinking about some of the QUAC's comments. The basin plan starts with waters that are already on the impaired list and how to move them off.
Yes.
Not necessarily aimed at a higher target of not getting waters onto the impaired list. It's trying to deal with the current problem right now.
Well,
and in the future may.
right, well, protection of high-quality waters is important, but the overall, what do we do to protect water resources is better described in the Vermont surface water strategies, because that's just everything, and we didn't want to have each basin plan include the encyclopedia of everything that has to be done. That it's very specific to, let's get this done over this 5 years. These are the waters that we know are impaired, and these are areas we need to monitor more. There's definitely that list as well, as we have concerns about. I'm dealing with the like the La Platte and some other areas now, but let's say we're concerned with, you know, Thorpe Brook because of water withdrawals, because of hemp fields. So let's make sure that we get some monitoring in there, and so that would be a strategy. So we do look at concerns that people might have or we might have by adding. But if it's not on the impaired list, then it goes onto the list for more monitoring, so we can understand better what we need to address.
Karen, could you speak a bit to this issue of phosphorus as the kind of the bellwether, and is that due to the federal mandate from EPA because of, in our case, Lake Champlain?
Well, I mean, it's a huge part of the basin plan. I dread having it in there because of this, because you feel like that's all we're focused on. But there is a lot of work and resources need to go towards it, and it has to be such a large section in the plan because EPA is requiring us to account for how we're going to address it and where we're at. And so that's why that section is so huge. When it comes to looking at the other issues in the basin plan, like chlorides are impair Sunnyside Brook. I always forget the name, near Costco. And so, you know, there's in that chart with all the impaired and stressed waters on the right, there is a list of things we're going to do, and there it's like, well, we're going to have to, I forget if it's monitor. I know we have to monitor more, but we also want to support winter management strategies, so that because it has to be more of a voluntary effort to reduce chlorides at this point in time, but we need to continue to monitor so that maybe it becomes a TMDL, so then there'll be more regulatory sort of a handle on that. So those issues are identified, and then a statement is made as to how it's going to be addressed. But in terms of, let's say, a more systemic problem like, well, the pesticides. Pesticides are used, and are they an issue, and how should we address those? Those are, that larger conversation is in the Vermont surface water management strategies. And it's also then looked at by, which describes that it's being looked at by the Pesticide Council, Vermont Pesticide Council, I think it's called, which, you know, our staff is on, and discussions are happening there as to what we need to look at more and how we need to be concerned. And the discussions that are, you know, maybe what we need to do more is figure out a way to describe the discussions that are happening with the Agency of Ag and DEC about pesticide use, and making sure that it's monitored and that we can understand the impact it has to surface waters. But at this point, we don't have a surface water that's impaired for pesticides in this area. So it wasn't a large discussion. I couldn't really put it in the plan because we're talking about what we do right here and now, and the explanation of what's being done to make sure that it doesn't become a problem is somewhere else. But maybe we need to make sure that it's referenced so people know what's going on, and make sure, you know, if it isn't in the Vermont surface water management strategies.
I want to make sure other commissioners have a chance to, maybe, are there any others who haven't spoken yet who want to speak to this issue? Julie?
Yeah, I want to raise some issues that haven't been brought up. I really appreciate all the work that the committee did in diving in and really mastering voluminous amounts of
information and data and projects, because that was part of the nature of what you got asked to do in providing feedback to the agency. And I appreciate your frustration that a lot of the issues that you think are important didn't make it into the plan, weren't considered with the plan. And I actually agree with many, not all, but many of the points that you raise in the letter. But I think the piece that sort of, for me, is a disconnect is the context of this basin plan in sort of a process and a policy kind of framework that it's been developed in. And just as a quick aside and an anecdote, when I was in graduate school, I got a job to help pay my way, but I got hired by the state I was in, their equivalent of A&R, to do some final editing on a river basin plan. So these kinds of plans have been around for a really long time. And river basin plans for many, many, many years were done in a very comprehensive kind of way. They described everything. They talked about everything. They analyzed everything to death. And you ended up with huge, huge plans. The reason I got a job is it was time for the next plan to start to be developed. And somebody said, you never actually published the last one. So I got a job to do the final editing, all those blue lines and taping things in. This is how long ago it was. Nothing was on a word processor. To get these things out the door so they could actually get onto the next iteration of these river basin plans. But the problem with these comprehensive plans that were so comprehensive is that because they discussed everything and talked about everything, it took them a really, really long time to get the plans written. And then people were kind of exhausted and the plans got shelved and there wasn't a whole lot of implementation that went on. A&R has recognized that that kind of approach is a problem, and the whole point, I think, of doing these, more strategic and tactical, particularly tactical basin plans, was to kind of get to the point and come up with projects that go out and do things. And the point was a little less discussion and a little more action. And in trying to narrow things down, the A&R took some cues from the legislature that said that in dealing at least with the phosphorus kind of issue, it was the legislature who said, everybody's got to pitch in, and we want to start on the things that we can get going with as soon as possible. Let's do those first. So that sometimes meant that there was a lot of emphasis on projects that perhaps were not the big contributors to phosphorus pollution. But they were the ones that could get started right away and at least start making a dent. And so a lot of the kinds of municipal road permits, that kind of fell into that kind of category, and maybe that's easier to more tractable than some of the agricultural kinds of issues. The state has also tried to focus, it has this Vermont surface water management strategy to provide them a framework for how they go about trying to decide what should be in these sorts of plans and where the priorities should be. And presumably that was followed in the development of, how they want to get not just the Winooski plan, but the plans in all the other river basins done and get them done in a more or less consistent fashion, which can be a challenge in a large agency with quite a few staff covering the entire state. And they've also have recognized, and it's on their website where they talk about this surface water management strategy, that the basin plans are focusing on surface waters. They're not focusing on groundwater because there are some other programs that do go and focus on groundwater. Now, for better or worse, you may quibble, and we may all quibble with some of the choices that have been made, but nevertheless, in an effort for the agency to try and make sure that these plans get done, they put up a framework, they had a process, and they tried to follow it. In doing so, they've made some choices that, based on your letter, I think you don't agree with, and that's okay. But I mean, there is a reason for why that got done, and partly I think it's to have plans that don't sit on a shelf for 5 years until you start the next one, but nothing ever happens. And so I'm not certain that writing a letter that says, we don't like your priorities and you didn't listen to our comments and implement them as part of your plan, nevertheless addresses either the priorities that the legislature set or the top level priorities that the agency has set in trying to just make sure that these plans actually get implemented. And our involvement as a regional planning commission is to provide some closer to the source kind of review and comment and sense of priorities for the agency. But ultimately, it is the state's plan. It's not our plan. It's their plan. And just like we might provide comments as individuals to our municipal town plans, not all of them get addressed. Towns may provide comments to the Regional Planning Commission on our regional plan. Not all of them get addressed. We have provided comments to the state for this basin plan. Obviously, not all of them got addressed, and that's part of your point. But I don't know that it's realistic to expect that somebody in doing a large plan and a series of large plans like this are necessarily going to incorporate everybody's comments. So I have, as I said, I appreciate all the work that you've done, and I empathize with a lot of it. I'm just not sure that a letter like this necessarily will evoke some of the changes that need to be done after the fact. At best, it might get on the agency's radar for the next cycle of plans, that maybe it does need to be more than looking at phosphorus, because that's what it feels like, even though the plan does do a little bit more than phosphorus. I'm just not certain that the letter will accomplish really what you're looking for at this point in time. And I'm not certain that it's the right thing for us to be doing.
Okay, before we move forward, if I could just interject here, we're almost at 8:30. I think my suggestion is, before we kind of get into another round of debate about the letter, let's talk about the next steps. My suggestion here is that we've had some conversation about having the letter come from the Board of Commissioners. We could authorize Bonnie to sign the letter. I think what I would suggest we do, since we're almost out of time, is that we bring a letter back. If the committee could bring a letter back at our next meeting that would be addressed to, decide who you wanted addressed to. We talked about A&R, Secretary of A&R, make a recommendation, let's say for Bonnie's signature, and then you bring back the letter that you want the Board of Commissioners to consider. I realize this is probably maybe 95% or 99% to where you would like to see the letter be, and then let's have a conversation, and we can have have some more discussion, and then have a motion. And I realize we may not all agree, and that's fine. We have other actions that we don't all agree on. So how does that sound to the committee as far as the next step? Would that work for you, to come back with a letter that takes into consideration the conversation we've had? And I realize we haven't had probably an exhaustive conversation, but I think, Karen, your input is extremely valuable. I think we've heard a good range. Does that work for you?
I'm wondering if we could have a straw poll at this time among the commissioners to see who would be in favor of moving forward with this. In other words, there has been good discussion, but to rework a few sentences in the letter and add to the Secretary of A&R line may not be what's needed. at this time. The question is, here's our opinions. Here's our concerns. We're trying to raise awareness. The basin plan is a good plan. It doesn't hit on everything, but as you use the basin plan, consider these concerns. The lady that just spoke said, well, we're really concerned with surface water, not groundwater. Well, surface water and groundwater are just like this. And that's what it says in here. You've got to consider both at once. So, are the commissioners willing to move forward with this if we tweak it a bit?
I guess as vice chair in charge of this meeting, I would respectfully ask that we not do that. I think any motion has an opportunity for discussion. I think we would need a discussion on a motion, and that can be a lengthy process. I would ask that you come back with a letter that you'd like to recommend the board send. I think straw polls in some contexts work. I don't think in this context it's the way to go. That's just chairing the meeting. I would suggest that you come back with a draft that you would like to see the board approve, and then we can have that discussion and a motion and further, any further debate or information that you want to bring back. So how does that sound to the Board of Commissioners? Does it sound agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that. We really appreciate all of you coming and for all your work. I think that's been voiced here very well. Amy, thank you for coming.
So we'll be on the next.
Yeah, well, we'll work on the
meeting's
agenda. The executive committee will talk about it at our next meeting, and I think we'll probably try to include it in the next meeting, yes. So, okay.
Thank
Does
you,
that
guys.
sound good? Bram, did you have a comment before
Just,
we move on?
When you draft this letter, I think there's a misimpression that the phosphorus issue is being dealt with in the same way. Everybody in this room represents a town. You're going to be assessed large fees for the process. I am on the front line of this. I've spent hundreds of volunteer hours organizing a variety of projects for my town because we care deeply about water. And when A&R increases the spraying of material right next to the Winooski, I just feel like this is a political solution, and I want you to address the increase in permitting of spraying and spraying in the winter. As I said, everybody's going to be paying up for this, and it just seems to me like this is hitting and going after towns for a suggestion of a solution to a problem and not a real solution to a problem.
All right, thanks, Bram. So do you think we should wait on the minutes, or do you want to go ahead?
It's up to you guys.
Oh, is the minutes something we can deal with pretty quickly?
I move we accept the minutes.
Good.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. You got that, Nancy? Hold on.
Who made the motion?
I did.
Here. Okay, so we have a motion to accept the minutes of December 10th, and second, I believe, Amy seconded, correct? Okay, any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good, and we'll go through the reports later. I'll bet you have another motion, Don.
I do.
Oh, good.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn, a second.
Aye.